Welcome everybody to the first of our first of this seminar's this semester. Sorry, it's already been a long day. This semester's community or alumni webinars, and I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to welcome Alex Radu, an alum of, or half alum of the business school, but a full alum of the university. And currently working for JP MorganChase as the VP Education Community Manager for Engineering Practices. Hopefully that was right, Alex. I'm really looking forward to today's session. My name's Nick Wilton. As I'm the Dean of the Business School, I should have introduced myself, apologies, but I'm really looking forward to the session because lots of the things in the summary of Alex's talk is very resonant, I think, with me and lots of colleagues in the university, and I'm sure it'll resonate with lots of you too and be hugely helpful. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Alex. Welcome, Alex, and thank you for giving up your time. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, but over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nick and Crystal. I'm super excited to be here. I have been thinking more about giving back to my universities as an alumni for the past couple of months. So I think when Crystal emailed me, I was super excited, and I came with this proposition to do this talk on deep work because I think it's super relevant, as you said, like for the times that we live in, but also for anyone, whether you're working, studying, doing anything. It's really important to be able to have some focused time. So I'm going to start, and you do have a Q&A box as well. I will have a couple of audience engagement kind of like questions where I might ask you to raise your hand, and I've tested out that works for us, so I can make sure that I can see some of your responses. But if you have any questions in the meantime, you can put them in the Q&A chat box. We're also going to have live Q&A at the end, but just so you know that you can ask the questions, and I will keep an eye on it to see if I can answer any of them as we go throughout the session. So today, I hope that you're going to learn a bit about how you can integrate focus work into your day. You're going to be able to find out how you can gain more value from your time and have better control of your time. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a story about before discovering deep work and after discovering deep work. And in the beginning, I didn't actually know it was called that. But about 5-6 years ago, around the pandemic, I was really thinking about the fact that I felt a bit burnt out, and I really felt like I didn't have any control over my days, and things just happened to me. And it made me feel a little bit powerless. So then I thought, I want to gain back some control over my time and how I'm spending my time. And I want to make sure that I can make time to focus on the things that really matter to me, whether it's at work or like my personal life. So I'm going to share with you today a couple of the things that I've discovered along the way, including some tools, some frameworks, and some processes that I use in my work kind of like week to make sure that I'm working on the most important and valuable things. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about deep work and flow. Some of you might be familiar with flow, but you might not be familiar with deep work. And I have another funny story about how I found out about deep work as a concept in a book. And it involves an airport and a very, very interesting meeting with someone that I never knew before. I'm going to talk about how you can harness it, some methods you can use to create an effective schedule, and also understand how you can focus on work that provides value, and how you can get started like today or tomorrow. So before I start, I want to ask if anyone or many of you spend time reducing meetings and blocking your time to get stuff done. And I want you to raise your hand virtually if you do today. Okay, we have Andres, Junior, Luisa. Okay, we have a couple of people. Yep, okay. I'm going to be curious, and I'm going to ask you more questions about that afterwards, because I'm also going to share how I block time. Okay, so I can see loads of people. Awesome. I'm not a big football fan, American football fan, but I love this quote, and I really like Tom Brady. And he says that to be successful at anything, you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people aren't. And it's consistent, determined, and willing to work for it, and not having any shortcuts for that, right? And I think all of you here today are very much in that category, because like otherwise you wouldn't have shown up and we wouldn't be having this conversation if you weren't, you know, like determined, willing to work for it, consistent, right? But I think that's really important because sometimes people think the final outcome and result is kind of like magically happening. But the truth is that behind that, there's a lot of consistency and perseverance and work ethic and like just putting the time in and the work in, right? And it's pretty similar with deep work. So that philosophy is kind of like the same thing. You can't do deep work if you don't create the environment and the practices and you don't have the frameworks to be able to allow yourself to do that. As I said in kind of like the intro of the talk, the ability of us to actually perform deep work is becoming really, really difficult and rare. It's increasingly valuable to actually create like really high quality work or outputs or results. But it's really, you know, like difficult to get it done because of all of the distractions, whether that's like your personal life, whether it's your phone, whether it's your apps, whether it's your notifications, whether it's the news, whether it's anything, you know, like in our environment, that's making it really, really difficult to do this. So the people who can cultivate this practice actually can have a significant advantage to people who can't or who don't. And beyond like the economic value of doing deep work, which can lead to a state of flow. So if you're doing deep work, you can enter the state of flow. I'm going to talk a bit about the difference between the two, but it can actually bring you kind of like satisfaction and meaning in your professional life and in your personal life. So I had a bit of a description and kind of like definition of deep work from Colin Newport, and he's the person who wrote the book on deep work. I actually found out about him from a lady in the airport who was in front of me boarding a plane to Glasgow. I live in Scotland, and she was reading this book on slow productivity, and it was really funny because I was like, "Oh, that sounds really interesting." So she recommended the book. I got on the plane, got home, got the book, read the book, loved it, and then realized he had many more books. And I read the book on deep work, and I was like, this makes so much sense, and I've been doing this, but I just didn't know that it was called that. So my first recommendation is read the book. Like, read the book. So if you want to really learn a bit more, and he has a really nice writing style, he gives a lot of examples, he gives a lot of analogies and kind of like real life people that use these practices to actually make a lot of progress. He talks about how everyone's kind of like schedules and seasons are different and how you might want to change yours in like depending on the type of work that you do and the role that you have. It might work in days or weeks or months or hours. Like it might be different from you and how you make time for focus. So I'm going to ask you another question. Do you feel exhausted after a day of work or study or, you know, like changing context 200 times a day? You can raise your hand if you do. Okay, I can see a few people. I'm going to raise my hand because I sometimes do. Not as much as I used to, but sometimes do. Okay. So the thing is, context switching and the lack of focus and having to deal with 100 things coming at you and being in your head all the time makes you also feel exhausted. And it's like, it might be sensory, it might be cognitively overload for you. And that's why focus and deep work are really important, because it allows you time to only concentrate on one problem or one thing. And it stops you from kind of like changing your focus every other second. I also have to admit, I do not have notifications on my phone. I've disabled all of them, and I go back and check stuff just when I need to, like my email, even like my work profile. I don't get pop-ups or notifications for any pings or emails or anything like that. Like I completely have them off on my phone, and on my desktop. They kind of like, I have a little icon in the next to the clock that I can check if I want to, but generally I don't actually get any dings or anything. Like I reduce that noise to a minimum where I can. Right. So I know there are a couple of questions coming in, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. So I think like for me, the single most important action you can do for like yourself and your work and your life is to limit and drain the shallow work and distractions and commitments as much as you can. And like shallow work could be things like checking your Instagram or checking your email or just scrolling through, like things that don't actually bring you value, but you do them either because of like dopamine hit or because you're just used to it and it's now become a habit. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the principles in the deep work book so you can get like a flavor. If you don't want to read the book or if you don't have time, that's fine. These principles are going to kind of cover most of the stuff that you need to know, which are like the key key things in the book. So I think like shallow work and like this culture of connectivity that we have are really the primary obstacles in preventing you to engage in deep work. If you reduce kind of like the haze of work, you can create like the prereq to actually implement other strategies like having social time, focused planning. But if you don't reduce kind of like the shallow work part, it's going to be really hard to schedule and make time for deep work. Because you're always going to have those like distractions, obligations that you're going to need to be handling. So I'm going to give you a few seconds so you can start reading through some of these rules, and I'm going to quickly go through some of them. But we have two questions. So the first one's around, as a neurodiverse, attention is quite tricky. And how can you focus if you have ADHD, for example? And their questions regarding actually doing stuff and consuming media or content I want to consume instead of just drifting. So I am not a medical specialist. This is just my advice. I do have in my circle quite a lot of folks that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and ADHD has different forms. So some folks actually hyperfixate on things and they can do deep work and focus really, really well because they like basically kind of like just focus on the one thing and they're fully absorbed in that. And then there's the other type of kind of like ADHD, among others, where you kind of like drift and your attention keeps on drifting. Now, deep work doesn't necessarily mean that you are doing one thing for 3 hours. It could mean that you are literally just, you have a goal that you want to achieve, and you're going to be doing things related to that goal to achieve that goal. That could also mean going for a walk and letting your brain process things, or it could mean basically saying, I want to finish reading this article in the next 20 minutes because it's paramount to the research that I'm doing for this thing that I want to achieve. And I think it's okay if you drift, but the important part is noticing that you're drifting and trying to bring yourself back to doing the thing that you were originally trying to achieve. And it's not necessarily about the time that you dedicate. It's about getting that accomplishment done in that period of time and not having shallow work come into your time. So it's about trying to be in the mindset and be in the space of I want to do this, and I'm not going to take out my phone, and I'm not going to go into the other website, and I'm going to use kind of maybe technology applications where I basically have like one tab open and that's the only tab I can work on because I know that I need to finish reading this or writing this, right? You can also use like the Pomodoro technique, which basically means like you do 20 minutes of work and maybe 5 minutes of break, or 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of break. You need to try out to see like what works for you and like how long you can actually keep your focus. Because it's going to be different for different people. Like if I'm reading a good book, I can literally sit on the sofa for 2 hours, not look up, not talk to anyone, literally be fully absorbed in that book until I feel like, ooh, I feel a bit thirsty. I'm going to go and grab a glass of water, right? Some people might not be able to do that. They might be able to read for 10 minutes and then they get distracted and they need something to remind them, hey, I need to get back to the thing that I was doing. Or they're not engaged enough to continue to do that because it might not just be as interesting as they thought it's going to be. And Julian asked, isn't focused, detailed, deep work also tiring when you put all that energy into it? It can be, but you'll again need to find your threshold. And I'm going to show you some frameworks in a bit that talk a little bit about that. And you only have, I guess, like so many hours of deep work in you every day. So you need to really figure out which hours those are and how you can actually go and utilize those to the most effect and impact before they kind of like go away. And again, this might mean that you do it in the morning or in the evening or like whatever works for you, but you need to figure that out. So in terms of like the rules, the first rule is work deeply. And you need to decide like your depth philosophy. And the book talks a little bit about that. It also talks about rituals and ritualizing things, like where you're going to work, how long you're going to work, how you'll work when you start, how you'll support your work. Like, do you need coffee? Do you need water? Do you need tea? Do you need snacks? Like, have all those things there so you don't have to have an excuse to go and do something else, right? You're focusing on your task. You can make grand gestures, like you might have your own room where you do the work, like an office room, or you always go to like this one library. I think like J.K. Rowling rented out like a Balmoral cottage or something to write like Harry Potter at some point. Make sure you don't work alone if that doesn't work for you, and you have like people that you can kind of like have like as accountability partners. And sometimes you need to be lazy, and like the downtime allows you to like gain insights and process things in the background. It helps you recharge, to be able to like work more deeply and be rested. um like the work that you do instead of having some downtime is not that important usually, and is not really gonna help you achieve those goals. The second rule is embrace boredom. Don't take breaks from distraction, take them from focus. And I think this is around like some of the questions that we got. So make sure that you reward yourself with breaks, like once you've done the thing or achieved the thing or worked towards the thing, right? The break is important because you focus so intensely and deeply. You're not like taking your break from Instagram and scrolling through stuff to do deep work. It's not the other way around. Um, Quit social media if you can, or at least relegate it to some parts of your life that you can control and you can push aside. I usually only use LinkedIn, and also any of the social media apps. I don't have any of those. I only use websites because I'm making it harder for myself to get absorbed into the black hole that is social media. So if you know that you're likely to kind of like waste time on these things, find mechanisms to prevent yourself from doing that to yourself. Also, the fourth one, which is the one that we started with, is draining the shallows. So like, how can you get, like a week worth of work in like a day? What can you do to optimize that? Kind of think about things in terms of the depth of the activity. So like, how long in weeks or months would it take me to train a smart recent grad without any knowledge of this to do this, right? If the answer is a day or a week, that's probably not the best thing that you need to use your deep work time for, or even at all use your time for it. Can you outsource it? Can you relegate it? Can you not do it? So that kind of thing. Make sure that, like you have like a budget for shallow work. Like, how much time should you really spend on reading email, and keep to that and put that in your calendar. Become harder to reach. So, like make people that send emails do more work. Like ask them, like, like maybe have an out of office or something that says like, I really need to know what you need from me, why, and by when, for me to be able to make a decision. Like sometimes you can have other people respond, or just, like pass it on to someone who might be better to respond than you. Um, do more work when you send a reply to emails. So like, instead of having a back and forth like 10 times, maybe just do the work then for like 5 minutes and just have 2 emails back and forth. I also saw a question, which I'm going to cover in a second. Just going to move to the next slide. And this describes the difference between deep work and flow. And by doing deep work, you can actually get into flow a little bit quicker. And it's conducive to getting a flow state. And the flow state, the only way I can describe it for me, it's when I'm doing something and I cannot quantify the passage of time. So I might think it's been like a minute or two, but actually it's been like 30 minutes since I'm doing the thing, which is again like the reading part, where I could read a book for 2 hours. But if you ask me, I think it's like, only doing it for like 15 minutes because like I'm so engrossed and involved in that activity that like I can't actually quantify the time passing. And that brings me to the question. You mentioned a lot about time, and we always say there's no time. And how would you define time? I think for me, I define time as work time and home time. So like my work time, I try to really, really stick to that schedule. So like I usually leave for work about 8 a.m. and I come back at 6 p.m. Those are my work time hours. And like everything I do during those hours, almost Monday to Friday, like that is my work time. And all of the time that I have there, I need to spend allocating it to the most important things that I need to get done for myself, for my team, for my organization, right? My home time is everything else in my personal life. It might be studying, spending time with my family, taking the dog for a walk, making dinner, doing laundry, whatever, right? And again, I have a finite amount of that time too. And I could consider like, maybe we should get a cook and a cleaner so like I can make more time. But really, do I want to spend that money? No, not really, because I don't really, like I don't think it's a good return on my investment. And sometimes like you might enjoy the cooking, you might enjoy the cleaning. It gives your brain a chance to like take a break from doing thinking stuff to doing manual stuff, and it can kind of like just be in that lazy mode of like I'm not really thinking and working. I'm just doing things with my hands, and I appreciate that like respite. If there's also any follow-ups to your questions, you can always put them in the chat and I'll kind of like get back to that. So I have asked other people to do this as well, and I was surprised. So I'm going to ask you all to take a pen or your phone or whatever you have and write down what your perfect workday or like just day looks like. And you can maybe do it as a time calendar, kind of like for a day from, I don't know, whenever you wake up, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. until like whenever you go to sleep. And think about like, what do you want to have in that day that would make you happy, productive, make you feel like you've achieved something by the end of the day, make you feel healthy, make you feel like, I know you have a purpose. So whatever that looks like for you, like for me, it would start with kind of like waking up, having a coffee, seeing my cat and my dog, my partner, my mom. And after that, maybe going to work. At work, I do some really productive maybe activities. Maybe I have a couple of planning meetings that set us up for success for a project. Maybe I have some quiet time where I can do some coding for a couple of hours. I have a break for lunch, maybe go for a walk with the dog, do some more work in the afternoon, potentially do some mentoring, do some learning, and then kind of like check my emails, make sure that I've not missed anything, check my messages, finish work, go make dinner, sit down with my family, have dinner, that kind of stuff, right? Maybe read a book after dinner, take the dog for a walk, like whatever makes you think about that, right? So the next parts, I want you to start thinking about what small steps because you start identifying to bridge the gap between the ideal perfect work day or day and where you are right now. And maybe think about what's stopping you from having that perfect day and start experimenting with some new approaches. And now I'm going to show you a couple of the approaches. So my favorite for work is calendar blocking. I also do calendar blocking for home so I don't forget stuff. Rethinking meetings, aiming for calendar 0 if you have a lot of meetings, and thinking about how do you limit your daily goals and how do you optimize the time that you're spending in deep work and in shallow work to achieve value and like progress what you're trying to get to. So the first bit I'm going to talk about is calendar blocking. And this is my favorite, and I've been doing this for years, and it really, really works for me. One reason why I like it is because it aligns with the kind of the rule of be hard to reach. Because if I block my calendar, and I usually do it 2 weeks in advance, people need to either tell me why they want to meet with me, or they will schedule it for 3 weeks from now because that's when my calendar is free if it's not urgent and not that important, right? And it helps me filter a bit what I do. And also it helps me have like uninterrupted blocks of time where I can do deep work and kind of like batch tasks or do similar things. And sometimes the plan changes, sometimes things come up, sometimes my manager needs me, and I have the time to be able to go and do that then, because guess what? 2 weeks ago, I blocked the time out. So even though the goal or like the block has changed its purpose, I still had the time and I wasn't feeling overwhelmed because I was already prepared. Um, Also, don't be overly optimistic at the beginning, just because you're going to be disappointed. But over time, kind of like iterate and figure out kind of what works for you. So the step one that I generally recommend for people is like to review your kind of like tasks and goals and look at like what your time looks like. So do you take a lunch break every day? Do you book in, do you need some time in to kind of like just take a walk for 15 minutes and kind of like get away from your desk? Do you do training regularly? Do you need to do a lot of research in your role or in your kind of like day to day? Do you do a lot of maybe community activities or networking? And how do you want to put that in? You then want to prioritize what are the things that are crucial to your role, your growth, your development, your happiness, and what you have to get done really, like non-negotiably for the next week. Um, and then kind of like what kind of time do you estimate that it's going to take you? So here's what kind of like next 2 weeks schedule looks like for me. And I usually plan 2 weeks in advance on a Friday. The week after the Friday, I actually have in like the goals and like the actual work blocks allocated to whatever I need to achieve that week. And the week 2 weeks after, I don't have any, it's just like a block because I don't yet know what I'm going to be focusing on. But I also don't want people to go and book all of my time already, because they can't find time next week. They're going to go to the next week after that, right? I also look at what it is that is crucial for like our sprint or like our achievements that next week, and then I start putting them in. I also try to schedule 25 or 50-minute sessions as opposed to an hour or 30 minutes, just to have a little bit more breathing time for me and for the people that are attending, just to have like a comfort break or a drink or, like whatever you need for 5 minutes, write up your notes or whatever, like afterwards. Then the week before on Friday, I adjust my priorities and basically I put them in the blocks. So I know that I'm going to be working on that stuff for that amount of time. And I keep myself to it. Like when my calendar pops up and it tells me you need to work on this, I drop anything I'm doing and I go and I start working on that. So a couple of practical tips in terms of calendar zero. So some people think that you should really aim to have no meetings in your calendar. But for most of us, reality is that's pretty impossible. Especially if you're like working in kind of like a corporate job or in academia, like you have to meet with people. However, what we should be doing is really be intentional and purposeful in how we're spending our time. So do a calendar audit, look at where you're spending your time, look at your perfect day and perfect week and where you'd want to be spending your time, and try to figure out, okay, like, do I really need to be in this meeting? Could I just get a follow-up email? Experiment with like different types of meetings. Ask people like, should this even be a meeting? Or like, should I even be there? Like, do you need me? If you don't have anything to say, listen, do after a meeting, chances are you probably don't have to be in that meeting. And it could have been an email or a message. Maybe try meeting free days. Like maybe on Fridays you don't take any meetings, or even meeting free afternoons or mornings, depending on like what time zones you work with. If there's a recurring meeting, ask like, do we really need this after 2 weeks? Like, is this really needed? Or, like, can we just set up a meeting for next time? Because like recurring meetings will happen and people will attend, even though they're not actually getting anything productive or useful out of them, just because they're there, right? Batch emails, communications into a time slot. I usually have one in the morning, one in lunchtime, one in the evening when I do like 25 minutes of, do I have anything to respond to, check, action, approve, whatever, in my email. There's a couple of other tactics you can use. Prioritization matrix. I've done this with my managers, and usually it helps when we're not really aligned on the priorities, like my priorities and their priorities might be slightly different. So it really helps to take a list of things and then like start putting it into like importance, value, access, and effort difficulty. And based on that, you decide like, like, should we do it now? Should we do it next? Should we do it if there's time? And don't do it at all. And that kind of like helps figure out like what to do and if it's helpful and if it's valuable and if you should be really spending the time doing that. The other tactic is eliminate, automate, or delegate. And again, have your list of stuff. Is there something you can delegate? Is there something you can automate? Or is it something that you need to eliminate and is actually not beneficial to you or anyone that you have that? Or doing like a retro with yourself, basically like after you've done stuff, do you, like do a review and figure out, actually, did I accomplish something after doing this? Was it useful? So even after this call, right? Go and think about this. Did I accomplish something? Did I learn something? Could I have done something better? Should I change something for tomorrow? Because I'm going to be doing this afterwards because I want to figure out like, was this useful? Was this good? Did people like find it useful? Can they do something based on this? Like, should I do this again? Should I can this? Like, it's the same for everyone. But ask those questions. So like reflect on that. And then there's another cool one. And this answers the question on, don't you feel tired after all that deep focus work? Yes, but here's a way that you can think about it in kind of like blocks of 3. So you'd want to have 3 hours of deep work at the beginning when you're fresh or when it works for you and like you feel like that's my 100% time. And these are like free of emails, messages, distractions, shut everything down, just sit down and do the stuff. And then you do 3 urgent tasks. So is there something that you really need to do, like pay a bill or email someone, get some access, study for the exam, whatever, right? Are there 3 urgent tasks that you really need to do, even though they might not be, like deep focused work? And then the third phase is doing 3 maintenance tasks. And this could be reading the news, going through your email, responding to messages, reading the article that you don't really want to, but you kind of need to because it's useful for something, right? And these are like essential for your long-term productivity and mental clarity, but they might not be like a huge amount of effort. And they allow your brain to have a little bit of a break, decompress, and then get ready for like future challenges, right? So you kind of like, you have a framework that you can try out where you're like, okay, 9 to 12, I'm doing the stuff. I might then have a lunch break, do some urgent tasks that I need to do, and then I'm going to go and do some maintenance tasks that I should do because long term, they're kind of needed and they're useful, but they're not really high value right now. There's another question. So after we've discussed all of this, look at your previous sketch of your perfect day and, like your current work day and consider what changes you'd make. So like, would you move stuff around to batch it into like 3 hours to have 3 hours of deep work? Would you decline some meetings? Would you use more asynchronous methods to communicate, like, I don't know, like Slack or Teams or whatever? Would you add an agenda to your meetings to make sure that you're all focused? That kind of stuff. And the question was, I really appreciate flexibility. Did you ever feel anxious doing this? I think this is my biggest problem on how to commit when my schedule changes so much. So I felt a bit anxious before I started doing this, actually, because I felt like I didn't really have any control. And I felt like my schedule wasn't my schedule. It was everyone else's schedule because everyone else had stuff thrown into it and like put into it last minute, or, like I felt like I couldn't actually plan and prepare to do my best work and to get the best outcomes because everything was someone else's preference first, right? And there's this saying, like, when you say yes to someone else, you're saying no to yourself. And that's pretty true for me, at least. So my current approach is calendar blocking, specific goals, and time boxing. So I block my calendar in advance 2 weeks to make sure that I have time. I leave some slots open in case people need me and they don't want to ask me for my time. But generally, that's like 2 hours a week that I leave open in the morning and in the afternoon for different time zones to be able to book 30 minutes, like 25 minutes with me. I have a top 3 specific goals for the week, plus some additional kind of like nice to have. Like if I have the time, I would love to do those too. If not, they go into the next week. And I also time box. So I allow a certain amount of time for all of these things per week. I also have a tip or a process that you could try. So if you're feeling anxious about this, this is going to be like a really easy thing to do. And funnily enough, I have a slide on this. So what if I really don't have time for deep work? I do want to tell you that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? So if you keep procrastinating on doing this or starting this, right? Maybe give it a go and see how you feel after it and iterate, but don't let the fear of having to kind of like control your time a little bit better stop you from doing it, because you might discover that it's actually helping you and reducing like how anxious or stressed you feel about your day. And it will make you feel like it's more of your day than someone else's plan for your day. So I sat down to write the slides for this and update the slides a few weeks. And I really didn't want to start. But then like on the day, I was kind of like, okay, I have like an hour. I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna do it. And I sat down and I finished actually in like half an hour. Because like I had some of the stuff ready. I just needed to like change stuff and remove stuff and like update it because I wanted to make it really interesting for all of you. But I realized that I was doing the thing that I generally tend not to do at work because this wasn't part of my work schedule. And then I was just like, right, I have an hour. I'm just going to sit down. I'm going to do this. And then it took me less time. And then I felt like super accomplished because I was like, oh, yay, I did this and I don't have to worry about it now. Right. And the thing that I want you to like try out is if you do one thing after this, right, I want you to try this out. Pick like one high impact task or goal that you have. And it can't be stuff like, oh, I need to check all my emails, right? That's not high impact, right? Might be something like you want to write your manager to like ask them for a stretch goal or like another opportunity to improve on some skills you have. Or you might want to create your LinkedIn profile, update your LinkedIn profile. You might want to apply for a talk or a tech conference or whatever, right? Like it needs to be something that's going to make a big difference to you as a person, whether it's for your professional life or your personal life, right? And then start thinking about, I want to get there. How can I break this down into like 25-minute sections and like get from where I am right now to where I need to be to get this done, right? And how many of these do I think I'm going to need? And what do I need to do in each of them to do this, right? You can use AI to help you break that down, right? And give you an idea of like, oh, if I wanted to update my LinkedIn profile and I wanted to create like these sections, what do you think my tasks are and how long do you think it's going to take me to do each of them, right? If you don't want to put in the effort for it, you could get some automation assistance to make you do it quicker, right? And you know, you might want to say, okay, well, actually want to run some AI prompts to improve my bio for my LinkedIn. That's going to take less than writing it myself, but then I maybe need to put in another 15 minutes to actually like rewrite it. And then I want you to like, once you have the plan and the time, I want you to find that 25-minute block, close everything, all of your tabs, all of your phone, put everything on do not disturb, set a timer for 25 minutes, and then start. And then start writing whatever you wanted to write for your bio, start updating your LinkedIn profile, start asking AI to like give you some ideas, whatever it is for the next 25 minutes, you just do the thing that you want it to do and you just start. And like, once you do that, and once you're in motion, the next step's going to be easier because you're going to be like, actually, I probably finished on time or less time than I thought it was going to take me. So I might tackle the next item on the list, and maybe it's going to take me even less than 25 minutes, right? And once you start to see progress, that's when you start to understand, oh, okay, this is great, right? Like I can do this. It's not as hard. And then you just find the stuff that worked for you. And that 25 minutes might turn into an hour, might turn into 2, might turn into 3. And the next thing you know, every morning you're spending 3 hours working and progressing the things that really matter to you and are really impactful to you. I also wanted to point out, I do have some apps that help me with this. And my favorite one, I use an Android device, my phone. Most of my devices are Android or Linux. And I have something called Digital Wellbeing from Google. It's on Pixel phones. I think you can get it on other Android phones too. But basically, I can set up like timer limits on applications. I can set up work profile schedules where it disables all of my work applications. I can set up like routines, all sorts of things, right? Like supporting habits to help me make sure that I am making time to progress the stuff that I care about. And for that, you need environment, rituals, and rest. And you can't really do it without those supporting habits. This is a summary. Sorry. Of what we've covered today. So I want you to like explore one or more of these methods that we talked about. So whether that's like calendar blocking, and I know that a lot of you said you already do that, but maybe you found something new that you can try for that. Looking at how you can reduce or repurpose or, you know, like rethink meetings if you have a lot of meetings. And then like if you want to try out like the 3-3-3 method and giving that a go, or just a 25-minute block, try it, see if it works for you, and improve from there. The last thing I wanted to ask was if there was a favorite method or tactic that you learned about today, or if you have any other ones that you're using that you want to share. That would be great. And I do have a question in the chat. You can also raise your hand and we can have a chat. We can unmute you if you want to ask any live questions. But that's like the content that I have. And I'm going to take the question in the chat because I think it's really important. So an anonymous attendee asked, how does all you are saying sit within an organization's culture? So I think that's an important point. I do also think that we have more control than we know. So I actually talked to my managers all the time. Like I have a README for me as a manager and as an employee. Like this is how I work and this is how I like to work with people and how I would appreciate if we work together. I think that's really important. I also think that you are one of the people that create that culture. And I share these practices and these techniques with a lot of my colleagues. I did do a similar session internally in my company for this. And I also try to tell them that like, you can set your own boundaries and you can implement these changes and you can make this happen for yourself and for your team and maybe for your larger organization. But you need to be honest and explicit about this. Like most of the people I work with, they know I calendar block. And they come and they say, hey, I can see your calendar's busy. I need you for X, Y, Z. Can we meet this week or next week? Right. And now I have the context of what they need me for. And I could just respond and be like, actually, here's the link. Go there. You can find what you need. Or, yep, I want to talk to you about this. Let me see what I can do and find our calendars. And then I can control where I want to put that slot. Or do I need to put it next week? Right. And I'm transparent about that. And people know that about me. And I've never had anyone be like upset or angry that like, oh, your calendar's blocked. It's like, maybe I had meetings all the time. Like there are people who have like days of meetings. Maybe I'm one of those people. You still need to ping me and tell me why you need me so I can tell you if yes, we need to meet or not. I think the other part of it is I did have managers that really understand how I operate and how I work. And they operate in a different way. Like I have had leaders who we talk about this and they're like, oh, like I wish I could do that and I wish I could do this. And I'm like, well, let's see, can you? Like, do you actually need to be in all of the meetings you're invited to? Do you actually need to say yes to everything you're doing? Some things you have to say yes to because of the position you're in. But a lot of the things that we think we can control, we can. It's just that we don't want to have the friction that comes with saying no, or that comes with having to question, why are you putting 30 minutes in my calendar? I really, really hate, there's two things that I really, really hate in corporate culture. One is pinging me hi and not telling me what you want from me. I never respond to those. Or if I do respond, I ask them, how can I help? Because like it serves no purpose for me to distract my attention, look at that message, and know exactly what I knew before I looked at the message, which is nothing. And the second one is people that set up meetings with no forewarning, that have no agendas and no explanation as to why they're setting up that meeting, right? And most of the time, I do the same thing. I'm like, I see you've put a meeting in my calendar. Can you tell me what this is about and what you need me for before I actually accept this? Because I don't know what you want from me, right? So being like communicating clearly what you need and why you need that person and for what and for how long, like those things reduce the friction of back and forth, and they also make the person wanting to help you more, and they can give them context of, can I really help this person, or can I actually not do anything for them because I'm not the right person? But if I find that out, like after that meeting, I've already spent time thinking about it, preparing for it, asking stuff about it, and attending it, which is probably an hour that neither of us should have or could have wasted, right? So I think like there's organizational culture, but then there's like your own control and boundaries and like things that you can do to change the culture or to coexist with that culture while still protecting your time and the value that you produce. Because like honestly, no one wants to pay someone money to just answer emails, right? Like it's probably not the most beneficial, biggest impact, biggest return on investment you can do for a company. But still, there are so many people that just have to do that and feel like they can't escape that like vicious circle. Gina said that she thinks the most beneficial strategy is the 3-3-3 method. That's awesome. And Julian said that agree, be a culture creator, not a culture consumer. Yes, and every single person in a community, organization, team is part of creating the culture, right? It's not just it happens and it exists. It's what everyone does every single day.